Welcome to Marple Parlor, where we unravel the timeless mysteries of Agatha Christie with a touch of modern flair. I'm your host, Maddox Hale, and today I'm thrilled to bring you a brand new, original tale inspired by the Queen of Crime herself. Settle in with a cup of tea, dim the lights, and let me transport you to the shadowy world of Miss Marple. This is Blood on the Clocktower of Marigold Lane, a killer Miss Marple mystery. It's a long one, folks. Over 90 minutes of twists, turns, and that classic whodunit charm. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next adventure. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Is it a cozy armchair in London or perhaps a bustling cafe in New York? Chapter 1. Arrival at Marigold Lane. The autumn of 1925 was one of those seasons that seemed to hold its breath, as if the world itself were waiting for a mystery to unfold. Miss Jane Marple, with her sensible tweed coat and a straw hat perched neatly atop her silver hair, stepped off the 3:15 train at the quaint station of Marigold Lane. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke, and the platform was deserted save for a porter who tipped his cap and scurried away with her modest suitcase. Miss Marple, her knitting bag slung over one arm, paused to survey the village that lay before her. Marigold Lane was a postcard of English charm. Cobblestone paths wound past thatched cottages, their gardens bursting with late chrysanthemums, while the distant chime of a clock tower echoed over the rolling hills. She had come at the invitation of her dear friend, Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, a cheerful widow who had recently settled in a rose-covered cottage just off the main lane. "Jane, you simply must visit," Eleanor had written in her looping hand. "Marigold Lane is delightful, but there's a certain undercurrent. You'll see what I mean." Miss Marple, never one to ignore an undercurrent, had packed her bags at once. After all, as she often remarked, human nature was much the same whether in St. Mary Mead or the farthest reaches of the countryside. The village was centered around a grassy square where the ancient clock tower stood like a sentinel. Part of the ruins of an old Norman church, the tower was a curious structure, tall, cylindrical, with a gilded clock face that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Its base held a single oak door, heavy and iron-bound, always locked. Rumor had it only a handful of villagers held keys. The spiral staircase within led to a bell chamber and the clock mechanism, a place few ever ventured. Miss Marple noted the tower's imposing presence, its shadow stretching across the square like a warning. "Curious," she murmured, her eyes narrowing behind her spectacles. "Very curious indeed." Mrs. Bantry's cottage was a short walk, and soon Miss Marple was seated in a chintz-covered parlor, a steaming teapot between them. "Jane, you're a marvel for coming," Eleanor exclaimed, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Tonight you must join us at Marigold Manor. Sir Reginald Harrington is hosting a dinner party. It's the talk of the village. Everyone who's anyone will be there." "A dinner party?" Miss Marple's lips twitched into a smile. "How delightful. I find, Eleanor, that one learns so much about people over a good meal. Their little habits, their glances, why, it's like reading a book." Marigold Manor, the grand estate at the end of the lane, was the heart of the village's gossip. Its owner, Sir Reginald Harrington, was a formidable figure in his late 50s with a mustache like a well-groomed hedge and a temper to match. He had built a textile empire during the Great War, profiting handsomely while others suffered. His wealth was evident in the manor's sprawling grounds, its rose gardens meticulously tended, and the clock tower's recent restoration, a pet project of his. Yet whispers in the village spoke of ruthless business dealings and a family life strained by secrets. As Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry approached the manor that evening, the setting sun cast golden rays through the ivy-clad windows. The dining room was a vision of opulence, A long oak table gleamed under a crystal chandelier, and the air was thick with the scent of roast pheasant and claret. Sir Reginald presided at the head, his voice booming as he recounted a recent business triumph. Beside him sat his wife, Lady Victoria Harrington, a former West End actress whose beauty was as striking as her youth. She could not have been more than 30. Her diamonds sparkled with every gesture, but her laughter rang a touch too shrill, as if masking some deeper unease. Miss Marple, seated near the foot of the table, knitted quietly, her needles clicking like a metronome as she observed. The other guests were a study in contrasts. Arthur Harrington, Sir Reginald's son, was a handsome but wayward young man in his mid-20s, with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Village gossip painted him as a gambler, his debts piling up in London's shadier clubs. He toyed with his wine glass, casting furtive glances at his father, who had just announced plans to revise his will. "Arthur, my boy," Sir Reginald said sharply, "you'll get not a penny unless you mend your ways." The table fell silent, and Arthur's jaw tightened. Mr. Desmond Blackwell, Sir Reginald's business partner, was a thin, bespectacled man with the air of an overworked clerk. His fingers twitched as he spoke of accounts and investments, and Miss Marple caught the edge in his voice when Sir Reginald dismissed his concerns about a recent deal. Blackwell managed the family's finances, but rumors swirled of discrepancies, perhaps even embezzlement. A man with secrets, Miss Marple thought, her needles pausing for a moment. Then there was Miss Clara Voss, the Harringtons' maid, who moved silently around the table, serving with mechanical precision. In her 40s, plain and unassuming, Clara had served the family for decades, her loyalty unquestioned, yet her sharp eyes missed nothing. The villagers whispered that she knew every skeleton in the Harringtons' closet, from Sir Reginald's past indiscretions to Lady Victoria's late-night visitors. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee, and Miss Marple wondered what resentment simmered beneath her starched apron. Finally, there was Mr. Elias Thorne, the gardener, who did not dine with the guests but was seen earlier tending the manor's roses. A grizzled veteran of the Boer War, Thorne walked with a limp and a scowl, his loyalty to the estate marred by a long-standing grudge. Years ago, his wife had been dismissed from service after accusing Sir Reginald of impropriety. She died soon after, broken and penniless. Thorne's mutterings about justice were well known in the village, and his presence near the clock tower that evening did not go unnoticed. As the dinner progressed, tensions bubbled beneath the polished surface. Lady Victoria deflected questions about her recent trip to London, her fingers twisting a silk napkin. Arthur argued with his father over a racing bet, his voice rising until Sir Reginald slammed a fist on the table. Blackwell muttered about irregularities in a low tone, while Clara's gaze darted between the guests as if cataloguing their every word. Miss Marple, knitting a delicate lace pattern, missed nothing. "People are so very predictable," she said softly to Mrs. Bantry. "Like the villagers in St. Mary Mead. Ambition, jealousy, fear. It's all there if you know where to look." The clock tower chimed 10, its deep toll resonating through the manor. Sir Reginald rose, glass in hand. "A toast to Marigold Lane," he declared, "and to the clock tower, my pride and joy. I'll be up there at dawn to oversee repairs. The mechanism's been sticking. Needs a firm hand." His words hung in the air, and Miss Marple noted the glances exchanged. Arthur's scowl, Victoria's forced smile, Blackwell's frown, Clara's tightened lips. As the party dispersed, Miss Marple lingered in the hall, her eyes on the clock tower visible through a window. Its silhouette loomed against the starry sky, the clock face glowing faintly. "A locked tower," she mused, "and a man who loves control. I wonder—" She tucked her knitting into her bag and followed Mrs. Bantry back to the cottage, her mind already piecing together the puzzle of Marigold Lane. The night was still, but in the shadows of the manor secrets were stirring. By dawn the clock tower would chime no more, and blood would stain its ancient stones. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Night. The night of October 15, 1925, wrapped Marigold Lane in a velvet hush, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl and the distant creak of a gate. Marigold Manor, its windows, glowing faintly, stood like a silent giant at the end of the cobblestone lane. The dinner party had dispersed just after the clock tower's midnight chime, its deep toll reverberating through the village square. Miss Jane Marple, staying at Mrs. Eleanor Bantry's cottage, found sleep elusive. She sat by her window, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a lace scarf, her mind replaying the evening's undercurrents. The air was thick with secrets, and Miss Marple, with her knack for spotting human frailties, sensed a storm brewing. At Marigold Manor, the household was restless. In her opulent boudoir, Lady Victoria Harrington paced, her silk negligee trailing like a wisp of moonlight. Her argument with Sir Reginald at dinner still burned, his sharp words about her spending, her retort that she'd not be caged like one of his factory girls. Victoria was 30, her beauty a weapon honed on the London stage, but her marriage to Sir Reginald was a gilded trap. His fortune was vast, but his control suffocating. She paused by her mirror, her diamond earrings catching the lamplight. If Sir Reginald were gone, she'd inherit millions, freedom to return to her lover, a dashing actor named Julian Crane, waiting in London. She glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. Her fingers twisted the hem of her gown, and she slipped into the corridor, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. In his room, Arthur Harrington, Sir Reginald's wayward son, sat hunched over a desk littered with IOUs. At 26, his charm was fading under the weight of gambling debts, over 12,000 owed to a London loan shark who didn't take kindly to delays. Arthur's allowance had been cut off, and Sir Reginald's threat to rewrite the will echoed in his ears. "Not a penny unless you mend your ways." He poured another whiskey, his hands shaking. The clock tower, where his father often retreated to think, was a looming presence outside his window. Arthur's eyes narrowed. An accident up there, perhaps a fall, would solve everything. He scrawled a note, then tore it up, muttering, "Not yet." Mr. Desmond Blackwell, the accountant, was awake in the East Wing guest room, his lamp casting shadows over a ledger. At 42, Blackwell was a man of precision, his wire-rimmed glasses glinting as he traced figures. He'd discovered irregularities in Sir Reginald's accounts, profits skimmed from their textile empire funneled to offshore accounts. Sir Reginald had brushed off his questions at dinner, but Blackwell knew the truth could ruin him. If he confronted his partner, he'd be dismissed, or worse, framed for the theft. His pen scratched furiously, calculating risks. The clock tower loomed in his thoughts, a private place where Sir Reginald kept sensitive documents. Perhaps a confrontation there under cover of night. Miss Clara Voss, the maid, sat in the servants' quarters, her hands clasped around a silver locket. Inside was a faded photograph of her sister Mary, who had worked at the manor 20 years ago. Mary's life had unraveled after Sir Reginald's unwanted advances. Dismissed in disgrace, she took her own life. Clara, now 45, had stayed on, her loyalty a mask for simmering rage. She knew every corner of the manor, every secret whispered in its halls. Sir Reginald's affairs, Victoria's trysts, Arthur's debts. The locket's clasp dug into her palm as she whispered, "He'll pay." Her eyes flicked to a ring of household keys on her nightstand, including one to the clock tower's ancient door. Old Mr. Elias Thorne, the gardener, was not at the manor but in his cottage by the estate wall. At 60, his face was weathered as the oak he leaned against, sharpening a pair of pruning shears. The Boer War had left him with a limp and a hatred for men like Sir Reginald, who had profited while soldiers died. Thorne's wife, dismissed from the manor after accusing Sir Reginald of theft, had died in poverty. "The clock tower," Thorne muttered, his eyes glinting. "Where he hides his sins." He'd seen Sir Reginald climb its stairs at odd hours, papers in hand. Tonight, Thorne's limp seemed less pronounced as he slipped into the garden, his shears glinting in the moonlight. At 3 a.m., a shadow moved across the village square. The clock tower's oak door creaked open, then shut with a dull thud. The lock clicked, a sound swallowed by the night. Sir Reginald, known for his late-night retreats to the tower, had always insisted on solitude there. The key, one of only two, was in his possession. The other hung in the manor's locked cabinet, accessible only to Clara. No windows pierced the tower's stone walls, and the spiral staircase led to a bell chamber 50 feet above. The village slept, unaware. Dawn broke with a chill mist, and the clock tower's chime faltered, stuck at 6 Udo. The usual resonant toll was replaced by a grinding stutter, as if the mechanism protested. Villagers began to gather in the square, drawn by the odd sound. Elias Thorne, up early to tend the manor's roses, approached the tower door. He knocked, then tried the handle, locked as expected. Peering through a crack, he froze. "Good Lord!" he gasped, his voice carrying to the growing crowd. Mrs. Bantry, alerted by a neighbor, fetched Miss Marple from the cottage. "Jane, something's happened at the clock tower," she cried, her shawl clutched tightly. Miss Marple, ever composed, adjusted her hat and followed, her knitting bag in hand. The village constable, Inspector Craddock, a well-meaning but flustered man in his 30s, had arrived, his notebook already out. Thorne pointed to the door, his face pale. "It's Sir Reginald. He's dead." Craddock forced the lock, the door groaning open to reveal a grim scene. Sir Reginald Harrington lay crumpled at the base of the spiral stairs, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide with shock. Blood pooled beneath his head, staining the stone floor. The key to the tower door was in his pocket, the lock still engaged from inside. No windows, no other exits. Just the narrow staircase winding upward. The clock mechanism above ticked unevenly, its gears jammed. "It's impossible," Craddock muttered, scratching his head. "Door locked from inside, key on him. Did he fall? But how'd he lock it after?" Miss Marple stepped forward, her eyes scanning the scene. The body showed bruises beyond a simple fall, a scrape on the hand, a mark on the temple. The doctor, summoned hastily, estimated death between 3 and 5 a.m. "Not an accident," Miss Marple said softly, her voice barely audible over the crowd's murmurs. "This reminds me of a case in St. Mary Mead, a locked barn, a man dead inside. Things are rarely as impossible as they seem." She knelt, examining the floor. A faint smudge of dirt near the door caught her eye, not from Sir Reginald's polished shoes. A red herring, perhaps. Nearby, a handkerchief lay crumpled, monogrammed with an A. "Arthur's?" the crowd whispered, pointing at the manor. Miss Marple straightened, her gaze drifting to the clock face, frozen at 6 alm. "The mechanism jammed," she mused, "but it chimed correctly at midnight. Curious." As the constable cordoned off the tower, Miss Marple turned to Mrs. Bantry. "Eleanor, this is no accident. Someone wanted Sir Reginald dead, and they've gone to great lengths to make it look impossible. We shall see." The village buzzed with shock, and in the manor the suspects stirred. Lady Victoria in her boudoir, Arthur in his room, Blackwell at his desk, Clara in the kitchen, Thorne back in the garden. The clock tower stood silent, its secrets locked within its stones. Chapter 3. The crime discovered. The morning of October 16, 1925, dawned gray and heavy over Marigold Lane, the mist clinging to the cobblestones like a shroud. The village square, usually alive with market stalls and chatter, was a somber stage, its centerpiece the ancient clock tower where Sir Reginald Harrington had met his end. The tower's gilded face, stuck at 6 loomed over the gathering crowd, its stalled chime a grim reminder of the night's events. Miss Jane Marple stood near the tower door, her knitting bag slung over her arm, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Mrs. Eleanor Bantry hovered beside her, wringing her hands. "Jane, it's dreadful," she whispered. "Murder in Marigold Lane. Who could do such a thing?" Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. "People, Eleanor, are capable of all sorts when passions run high. I've seen it in St. Mary Mead. Jealousy, greed, revenge. We shall find the truth here, too." Her voice was calm, but her gaze was relentless, scanning the crowd, the tower, the manor in the distance. Inspector Craddock, the village constable, was in over his head. A stocky man with a red face and a penchant for muttering. He paced. Before the tower, his notebook flapping uselessly. "Locked from the inside, key in his pocket," he repeated as if the words might solve the puzzle. The oak door, iron-bound and weathered, stood ajar now, forced open by Craddock's crowbar. Inside, Sir Reginald's body had been covered with a sheet, but the bloodstain on the stone floor remained, dark and accusing. The spiral staircase wound upward, narrow and steep, to the bell chamber 50 feet above. No windows pierced the tower's walls, no trapdoors hid in the floor. Miss Marple had checked herself, her frail frame belying her thoroughness. The doctor, a dour man named Dr. Haydock, knelt by the body, his examination brief but telling. "Dead between 3 and 5 a.m., he declared, adjusting his glasses. "Neck broken, likely from a fall down the stairs. But these bruises—" He pointed to a scrape on Sir Reginald's hand and a purplish mark on his temple. "Suggest a struggle before he fell, not a simple accident." Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking as she began a new row of her scarf. "A struggle, you say? And yet the door was locked. Most curious." She stepped closer, inspecting the scene. The smudge of dirt she'd noted earlier near the door was faint but distinct, not from Sir Reginald's polished shoes, which bore only manor dust. Nearby, the monogrammed handkerchief with A embroidered in gold thread lay crumpled. Arthur Harrington's, no doubt, but too convenient, she thought. "A red herring, perhaps," she murmured to Mrs. Bantry, who looked puzzled. Craddock summoned the household to the manor's drawing room for questioning, and Miss Marple, invited as a local observer due to her reputation in St. Mary Mead, followed. The room was grand, with velvet curtains and a roaring fire, but the air was thick with tension. The suspects sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of unease. Lady Victoria Harrington, pale beneath her rouge, clutched a lace handkerchief, not unlike the one at the scene, Miss Marple noted. "I was asleep," she insisted, her voice trembling theatrically. "Reginald often went to the clock tower at night. He said it cleared his mind. I heard nothing until the villagers' shouts at dawn." Her eyes, red-rimmed, darted to the others as if gauging their reactions. Miss Marple observed her diamonds, still worn despite the hour, and wondered if Victoria's grief was as deep as her performance. Arthur Harrington slouched in an armchair, his tie askew. "I was in bed nursing a headache from that blasted claret," he said, his tone defensive. "Didn't hear a thing. Father was always climbing that tower, obsessed with it." His fingers twitched, and Miss Marple recalled the IOUs in his room, the threat of disinheritance. The handkerchief. "Lost it weeks ago," he snapped when Craddock pressed. "Anyone could have picked it up." Too quick, Miss Marple thought, her needles pausing. Mr. Desmond Blackwell sat stiffly, his ledger open before him like a shield. "I was working late, balancing accounts," he said, his voice clipped. The manor was quiet. "I heard no screams, no footsteps." His glasses glinted as he avoided Craddock's gaze. Miss Marple noted his nervous habit of tapping his pen. A man with something to hide. Perhaps the financial irregularities he'd hinted at during dinner. Miss Clara Voss stood by the door, her maid's uniform pristine despite the early hour. "I was up at 5 preparing breakfast," she said, her voice flat. "I passed the tower on my way to the kitchen garden. The door was locked, as always." Her hands were steady, but her eyes flicked to the locket at her throat, a gesture Miss Marple had seen the night before. Clara's access to the household keys, including the clock tower's spare, lingered in Miss Marple's mind. Mr. Elias Thorne, summoned from his cottage, stood apart, his weathered hands clasped around a cap. "I was tending night-blooming roses near the estate wall," he growled. "Saw a light in the tower window at 4, but thought it was Sir Reginald. Didn't go near." His limp seemed pronounced today, but Miss Marple recalled his swift movements in the garden last night. A war veteran's resilience, perhaps? Craddock, flustered, turned to Miss Marple. "Miss, you've a knack for this sort of thing. Any thoughts?" The room tensed, all eyes on her. She smiled faintly, her needles resuming their rhythm. "It's early days, Inspector, but consider a locked door, a key in the pocket, a struggle. Someone entered that tower or was already inside. The clock, too, jammed at 6, yet it chimed at midnight. Was it tampered with to mislead us?" She stepped to the window, gazing at the clock tower across the square. The crowd outside had grown, villagers whispering about curses and ghosts. A red herring surfaced. A villager reported seeing a cloaked figure near the tower at 3:30 a.m., but the mist obscured details. Miss Marple dismissed it. Too vague, too convenient. More intriguing was the dirt smudge suggesting an outsider's shoes. Thorne's boots, perhaps? Or Clara's from the garden? Or a deliberate plant? Back in the drawing room, Craddock pressed Lady Victoria. "You didn't hear your husband leave?" She shook her head, but Miss Marple caught a flicker of fear. Arthur's alibi was thin. Wine didn't explain his nervous glances. Blackwell's late-night work was plausible, but his ledgers might hold clues. Clara's calm was unnerving, and Thorne's story of roses at 4 a.m. raised questions. Miss Marple's mind turned to the clock tower's lock. Sturdy, but not impossible to pick or duplicate. Clara had access, but so might others with skill. As the interviews ended, Miss Marple lingered, her eyes on a small detail. A scuff on the drawing room rug, as if someone had paced near the window overlooking the tower. "Human nature," she said softly to Mrs. Bantry, "is like a tapestry. Tug one thread and the pattern emerges." She tucked her knitting away, her thoughts racing. The tower was a locked room, but not impenetrable. A string, a duplicate key, a hidden vent. She'd seen such tricks before. Outside, the village buzzed with speculation. The manor's staff whispered of Lady Victoria's London trips, Arthur's debts, Blackwell's arguments with Sir Reginald. Clara moved silently through the kitchen, and Thorne returned to his roses, his shears glinting. Miss Marple, standing in the square, gazed at the clock tower. "An impossible crime," she murmured, "but impossibilities are merely puzzles waiting to be solved." Chapter 4. Investigation begins. The sun struggled through the clouds over Marigold Lane on October 17, 1925, casting a pale light on the village square. The clock tower, its face still frozen at 6 in Maada, stood as a silent monument to the mystery that gripped the hamlet. Word of Sir Reginald Harrington's murder had spread like wildfire, and villagers gathered in knots, whispering of curses and locked-room impossibilities. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag ever present, stood near the tower, her sharp eyes tracing the cobblestones as if they might confess. Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, her face flushed with both excitement and dread, hovered nearby. "Jane, the whole village is in a tizzy," she said. "They're saying it's a ghost in the tower." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Ghosts, Eleanor, are far less troublesome than people. In St. Mary Mead, I've found that human greed and anger leave far clearer footprints." She adjusted her spectacles, her mind piecing together the puzzle. A body at the base of a locked tower, a key in the victim's pocket, bruises suggesting a struggle, and a clock jammed at the wrong hour. The dirt smudge by the door and Arthur's monogrammed handkerchief lingered in her thoughts. Clues or distractions? Inspector Craddock, the beleaguered constable, had set up a makeshift office in the manor's library, its shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes and Sir Reginald's business ledgers. He was out of his depth, his notebook filled with scrawled contradictions. "Miss Marple," he said, mopping his brow, "this locked room business, how could anyone get in or out? It's impossible." His voice carried a plea, and the suspect, summoned again to the drawing room, shifted uneasily under his gaze. Miss Marple, invited to observe, took a seat by the fire, her needles clicking rhythmically. "Nothing is impossible, Inspector," she said softly. "It's merely a matter of perspective, like a knot in one's knitting. Tug the right thread and it unravels." She studied the faces before her. Lady Victoria, Arthur, Blackwell, Clara, and Thorne, each a piece in the intricate pattern of Marigold Lane. The interviews began, and motives emerged like shadows in the fog. Lady Victoria, her beauty strained by sleeplessness, admitted to a recent argument with Sir Reginald. "He was insufferable," she said, her voice low. "Always controlling my spending, my friends. I wanted a divorce, but he refused." Miss Marple noted her mention of Julian Crane, the London actor, confirmed by village gossip as her lover. A divorce would have left her penniless. Sir Reginald's death, however, meant millions. Her alibi, sleeping through the night, was unshaken, but her nervous twisting of a silk scarf suggested more. Arthur Harrington, his eyes bloodshot, was less composed. "I told you I was in bed," he snapped when pressed about the handkerchief. "It's mine, yes, but I lost it ages ago, probably in the village pub." His gambling debts, Craddock revealed, totaled $12,000, and a loan shark's threatening letter had been found in his room. Sir Reginald's plan to cut him from the will was motive enough, but the handkerchief's placement seemed too obvious. Miss Marple's needles paused. "A distraction," she murmured, "or carelessness." Mr. Desmond Blackwell, the accountant, clutched his ledger like a lifeline. "I was up late working," he insisted, but his hands trembled as Craddock mentioned financial discrepancies. Blackwell admitted Sir Reginald had been skimming profits, planning to pin the blame on him. "We argued at dinner," he said, "but I didn't kill him. I needed him alive to clear my name." His motive was strong, exposure would ruin him, but his alibi held, supported by a maid who saw his light burning past 3 a.m. Miss Marple noted his nervous tick, wondering what his ledgers hid. Miss Clara Voss, the maid, stood rigidly, her answers clipped. "I was in the servants' quarters, asleep until 5, she said. Her access to the household keys, including the clock tower's spare, made her a suspect, but her demeanor was impenetrable. Miss Marple recalled the locket and Clara's whispered "he'll pay" from the night before. A villager mentioned Clara's sister Mary driven to suicide after Sir Reginald's advances years ago. Revenge was a potent motive, but Clara's calm was unnerving. A still pond hides deep currents, Miss Marple thought. Mr. Elias Thorne, the gardener, was gruff as ever. "I was tending roses by the estate wall," he repeated, his eyes hard. His boots matched the dirt smudge near the tower, but he admitted being nearby at 4 a.m., checking night-blooming flowers. His grudge against Sir Reginald over his wife's dismissal and death was well known. "He deserved worse," Thorne muttered, then caught himself. His limp, Miss Marple noted, seemed inconsistent, less pronounced when he moved quickly. A war veteran's strength could climb stairs, she mused. Clues began to surface, each layered with doubt. The dirt smudge suggested an outsider, but Thorne's presence was explained, and Clara's garden duties muddied the waters. A new find. A drop of oil on the tower stairs, fresh and slick near where Sir Reginald fell. The clock mechanism inspected by Craddock had been recently oiled by Thorne, who maintained the tower's grounds. Sabotage to cause a slip? Or another red herring? Miss Marple examined the lock, sturdy but not impervious. A duplicate key was possible, especially with Clara's access. She tested the door herself, noting its weight required strength to close quietly, ruling out a frail culprit. A villager's tale added intrigue. Mrs. Phipps, the baker's wife, swore she'd seen Lady Victoria arguing with Sir Reginald in the garden at midnight, hours before his death. She was furious, Mrs. Phipps said. Something about money in London. Victoria denied it, claiming she'd been in her room, but her maid, hesitant, admitted seeing her mistress's shawl missing that night. A crack in her alibi or village gossip run amok. Another red herring emerged. A vial of arsenic found in the manor's pantry, tucked behind jars of preserves. Poison seemed unlikely. The autopsy showed only trauma, but its presence pointed fingers. Clara, in charge of the kitchen, was questioned, but she claimed ignorance. Anyone could have hidden it, she said, her eyes cold. Miss Marple wondered if it was planted to shift blame, perhaps to Clara herself. The clock tower itself held secrets. Miss Marple, with Craddock's permission, climbed the spiral stairs, her steps careful on the worn stone. The bell chamber was cramped, filled with gears and ropes, the clock mechanism a tangle of brass. A faint scratch on the floor caught her eye, recent, near a small vent high on the wall. Too small for a man, surely, but enough for air, or a tool. The bell rope, she noted, was frayed, as if grabbed in a fall. He struggled, she said to Craddock, who trailed behind. But with whom? Back in the village, rumors swirled. A boy claimed to have seen a light flicker in the tower at 4:30 a.m., but his story changed with each telling. Miss Marple dismissed it, focusing on the oil and the scratch. She walked the manor grounds, noting the ivy climbing the tower's base, strong enough to support weight. Thorne's cottage was nearby, his tools including a ladder. A possibility, but risky in the dark. As evening fell, Miss Marple sat with Mrs. Bantry, sipping tea. "It's like a jigsaw, Eleanor," she said, her needles clicking. "The pieces are there, motives, clues, lies. But the picture is still hidden. The tower is locked, yet someone entered. The clock is jammed, yet it chimed at midnight. We must look closer." Her eyes drifted to the manor, where lights burned late, each suspect wrestling with their secrets. Chapter 5. Clues and Red Herrings. By October 18, 1925, Marigold Lane was a village on edge, its cobblestone streets humming with whispers of murder. The clock tower, its gilded face still frozen at 6 cast a long shadow over the square, a constant reminder of Sir Reginald Harrington's death. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag a familiar companion, walked the lanes with Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, her keen eyes missing nothing. The villagers' gossip had grown wild, tales of ghosts, curses, and secret passages, but Miss Marple dismissed such fancies. "In St. Mary Mead," she said softly, "I've learned that truth is often simpler than rumor, but far more dangerous." Her needles clicked as she pondered the locked tower, the bruises on Sir Reginald's body, and the tangled motives of the manor's residents. Inspector Craddock, frazzled but determined, had set up a command post in Marigold Manor's library, where ledgers and papers now mingled with his scribbled notes. The investigation was stalling. The locked room defied logic, and the suspects' alibis, though shaky, held just enough truth to frustrate. Miss Marple, invited to assist, sat quietly in the drawing room, her scarf growing longer as she listened to the latest findings. "Patience, Inspector," she murmured. "Clues are like threads. Some lead to the pattern, others merely tangle it." New evidence emerged, each piece a mix of truth and deception. A groundskeeper reported finding a ladder propped against the manor's wall, near the clock tower, the morning after the murder. It belonged to Elias Thorne, who admitted using it for pruning but swore it was in his shed by midnight. "Someone moved it," he growled, his limp pronounced as he stood before Craddock. Miss Marple noted the latter's rungs, clean, no mud, despite the damp night. A deliberate placement to cast suspicion, or a genuine clue? Thorne's grudge against Sir Reginald tied to his wife's dismissal and death made him a prime suspect, but the latter felt too convenient. Another clue surfaced. A tiny brass cog found on the tower stairs near the oil drop Miss Marple had spotted. The cog matched the clock mechanism recently serviced by Thorne under Sir Reginald's orders. Had the mechanism been sabotaged to cause a fall? Craddock sent a mechanic to inspect the gears, who reported the jam was deliberate, a pin inserted to halt the clock at 6 o'clock. "Someone wanted us to notice the time," Miss Marple mused, her needles pausing. But why? The midnight chime had rung true, suggesting tampering after Sir Reginald's death. A red herring to confuse the timeline, or a killer's mistake? Lady Victoria's alibi began to crack. The maid, Jenny, hesitant under Craddock's questioning, admitted seeing her mistress leave her room at 4 a.m., wrapped in a dark shawl. "She said she needed air," Jenny whispered, avoiding Victoria's glare. When pressed, Victoria faltered. "I couldn't sleep, so I walked the garden," she said, her voice sharp. "I didn't go near the tower." Yet Mrs. Phipps, the baker's wife, insisted she'd seen Victoria arguing with Sir Reginald at midnight, a claim Victoria denied. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The shawl, missing during the dinner party, was found in the laundry, stained with grass. A lover's quarrel turned deadly, or another distraction? Arthur Harrington's story also wavered. A stable boy reported seeing him near the manor's gate at 3:30 a.m., pacing nervously. "I was restless," Arthur claimed, his hands fidgeting. "Couldn't sleep after Father's threats about the will." The monogrammed handkerchief found at the tower was still a sore point. Arthur insisted it was lost, but a villager claimed to have seen him drop it near the square days before. Miss Marple wondered if it was planted to frame him, given his obvious motive, $12,000 in debts and a disinheritance looming. Yet his nervous demeanor suggested guilt, or fear of being caught in a lie. Mr. Desmond Blackwell's ledgers yielded a startling find, a hidden account showing 5,000 siphoned from the textile business, initialed by Sir Reginald. Blackwell, pale, admitted knowing of the fraud, but swore he hadn't acted. "I was going to confront him," he said, his glasses slipping. "Killing him would have ruined me." His alibi, working late, was solid, but a torn page in his ledger, dated the night of the murder, hinted at destroyed evidence. A red herring to suggest embezzlement as the motive or proof of his involvement. Miss Marple noted his twitching fingers, a sign of nerves under pressure. Miss Clara Voss remained an enigma. A kitchen maid revealed Clara had been seen polishing the household keys at 2 a.m., including the clock tower's spare. "Routine," Clara said flatly when questioned. "I always check them." Her locket, opened during a rare moment of distraction, revealed a note. "He must pay." Craddock pressed her about her sister Mary, whose suicide followed Sir Reginald's advances. Clara's eyes flashed, but she said only, "That was long ago." Miss Marple recalled Clara's access to the tower key in her quiet rage. A duplicate key perhaps slipped into the lock to stage the impossible crime. A bizarre red herring emerged. A villager found a bottle of laudanum in the manor's cellar, half empty, with no owner. Poison again, like the arsenic vial, but the autopsy ruled out drugs. Sir Reginald died from the fall. Was it another attempt to mislead, pointing to Clara or even Victoria, known for her headaches requiring tonics? Miss Marple dismissed it, focusing on the tower's physical clues. She returned to the bell chamber, climbing the spiral stairs with surprising agility. The scratch near the vent noted earlier was deeper than she'd thought, possibly from a tool used to jam the clock. The vent itself, high and narrow, seemed too small for entry, but she wondered if a rope or hook could have been used. Village gossip added fuel. A barmaid at the Clocktower Inn claimed Arthur and Clara had been seen whispering in the pub days before, an unlikely pair. An alliance? Miss Marple pondered. Arthur's debts and Clara's revenge could intertwine. Yet Clara's loyalty to the manor seemed unshaken, and Arthur's arrogance made cooperation unlikely. Another rumor pointed to Blackwell and Lady Victoria, seen talking privately after dinner. An affair or a plot? The threads were tangling, and Miss Marple's scarf grew longer as she sifted them. She walked the manor grounds, noting the ivy on the clock tower's base, sturdy but too exposed for a climb in the misty dark. Thorn's ladder, however, could have reached a hidden ledge near the vent. She tested the tower door's lock again, its mechanism stiff but pickable with skill. Someone strong, someone clever, she murmured to Mrs. Bantry, who trailed her. The killer planned this, but not perfectly. As dusk fell, a new complication arose. A villager reported hearing a muffled cry from the tower at 4:15 a.m., followed by silence. No one else confirmed it, and the mist that night obscured visibility. Miss Marple filed it away, suspecting another distraction. More pressing was the clock's pin, a deliberate act requiring access and knowledge. Thorn, with his maintenance duties, was a candidate, but Clara's keys and Blackwell's precision couldn't be ignored. In the manor's drawing room, Miss Marple sat with Mrs. Bantry, her needles clicking. "It's a puzzle, Eleanor," she said. "The ladder, the cog, the shawl, some are clues, some are noise. The tower is locked, but locks can be tricked. The clock is jammed, but why? We're close to the truth, but it's slippery." Her eyes drifted to the clock tower, its silhouette stark against the twilight. The village held its breath, and the suspects, each nursing their secrets, waited for the next move. Chapter 6. Complications and Twists. By October 19, 1925, Marigold Lane was a village gripped by unease, its cobblestone paths alive with hushed speculation. The clock tower, its face still jammed at 6 Toulouse, stood as a grim sentinel over the square, its silence louder than any chime. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag a constant companion, walked the lanes with Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, her sharp mind sifting through the tangled clues. A locked tower, a body with signs of struggle, a monogrammed handkerchief, a brass cog, and a ladder that pointed fingers but offered no answers. The village buzzed with rumors, but Miss Marple, ever practical, focused on the human threads: greed, revenge, betrayal. "In St. Mary Mead," she murmured, her needles clicking, "I've seen how secrets unravel when you tug just the right strand." Inspector Craddock, now haggard from sleepless nights, pored over notes in Marigold Manor's library. The locked room mystery defied him. Sir Reginald Harrington, dead at the base of the tower's stairs, key in his pocket, no entry or exit possible. The suspect's alibis, though frayed, held just enough to stall progress. Miss Marple, invited to observe, sat by the drawing-room's fire, her scarf lengthening as she listened. "It's a matter of perspective, Inspector," she said, softly. "Like a knot in yarn. Complex until you see the pattern." A startling complication shook the investigation. Late that morning, Arthur Harrington staggered into the manor's hall, his face bruised and his shirt torn. "I was attacked," he gasped, collapsing into a chair. "In the garden, near the roses, someone jumped me in the dark." He claimed it happened at dawn, blaming a shadowy figure he couldn't identify. Craddock examined him, finding scratches but no serious wounds. The story smelled of staging to Miss Marple. Arthur's flair for drama matched his gambling debts. "A diversion," she whispered to Mrs. Bantry. To shift suspicion, perhaps. Yet the scratches were real, and a torn piece of cloth, dark and fine, was found near the rose beds, not matching Arthur's clothes. A clue to another's presence, or another red herring? Lady Victoria's alibi, already shaky, crumbled further. The maid, Jenny, under pressure, admitted seeing Victoria slip out at 4 a.m. the night of the murder, not just for air, but carrying a small parcel. She looked frightened, Jenny whispered, avoiding Victoria's icy stare. Confronted, Victoria snapped, "It was a letter to my sister in London, posted early, nothing more." But no letter was found at the village post, and Mrs. Phipps, the baker's wife, doubled down on her claim of seeing Victoria argue with Sir Reginald at midnight. Miss Marple noted Victoria's trembling hands, fear of exposure or guilt. Her motive, tied to her lover Julian Crane and a potential inheritance, grew sharper. But the parcel intrigued. A tool, perhaps, used in the tower. Mr. Desmond Blackwell's composure began to crack. During a search of his room, Craddock found a burned scrap of paper in the fireplace, its edges showing figures matching the hidden account in his ledger. Blackwell, sweating, admitted a minor theft. 500 siphoned to cover personal debts, but swore it wasn't motive for murder. Sir Reginald was the real thief, he said bitterly. He'd have framed me to save himself. His alibi held, but the burned paper suggested he'd destroyed evidence. Miss Marple's eyes lingered on his twitching fingers. Was he hiding a larger crime, or merely a scapegoat? Miss Clara Voss, the maid, revealed a twist that stunned the room. Under Craddock's relentless questioning, she admitted the Locket's note, "He must pay," wasn't about her sister Mary, but a secret child. "Sir Reginald had a son," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Born to a servant years ago, hidden away. I helped raise him until he was sent off. The child, now grown, was a red herring. Clara swore he was abroad, unaware of his parentage. But the revelation cast her loyalty in a new light. Had she killed to protect a secret or to avenge the boy's abandonment? Her access to the tower key remained a nagging clue, but her calm demeanor suggested control, not guilt. Mr. Elias Thorne, the gardener, added another layer of intrigue. A villager reported seeing him climb the manor wall days before the murder, his limp barely noticeable. Confronted, Thorne admitted scaling the wall to check poacher traps, but denied entering the tower. "I know that place," he growled. "Climbed it as a lad during the war, knew every stone." His Boer War training made him agile despite his age, and the ivy on the tower, Miss Marple recalled, could support a skilled climber. The ladder, now missing from his shed, reappeared by the estate wall, its rungs now muddy. Had Thorne used it to access a hidden vent, or was it another plant to frame him? Miss Marple returned to the clock tower, her steps careful on the spiral stairs. The brass cog and oil drop suggested tampering, but a new clue emerged. A faint thread of blue wool caught on a gear not matching any suspect's clothing. A servant's uniform, perhaps, or a stranger's. The vent, high in the bell chamber, was her focus. Too small for a man, but a rope or hook could have been lowered through it, perhaps to manipulate the lock. She tested the idea with a piece of yarn, looping it through a gear, possible but requiring precision. "A clever mind," she murmured, "and a steady hand." The biggest twist came from a deduction. The locked door could have been secured from outside using a string trick. Miss Marple, recalling a St. Mary Mead case, explained to Craddock, "A string through the keyhole, pulled to turn the lock after the deed, then retrieved." It explained the key in Sir Reginald's pocket. No one needed to stay inside. But who had the skill? Clara with her keys, Thorne with his agility, or another unseen? Village rumors swirled, complicating matters. A barmaid claimed Arthur and Clara had plotted together, but her story faltered under scrutiny. Another red herring. Blackwell and Victoria's whispered meetings fueled affair rumors, yet no proof surfaced. A boy swore he'd heard the tower bell ring faintly at 4 a.m., not the full chime, suggesting someone tested the mechanism. Miss Marple filed it away, her mind circling the vent and the thread. As evening fell, she sat with Mrs. Bantry in the cottage, her needles clicking. "The killer is bold, Eleanor," she said, "but not flawless. The string, the cog, the ladder. They planned an impossible crime, but left traces. Someone in that manner knows more than they say." Her eyes drifted to the clock tower, its silhouette stark against the dusk. The village held its breath, and the suspects, Victoria pacing, Arthur brooding, Blackwell writing, Clara polishing, Thorne pruning, waited for the truth to surface. Chapter 7. Deeper Suspicions. By October 20th, 1925, Marigold Lane was a village taut with tension, its cobblestone paths whispering with fear and conjecture. The clock tower, its gilded face frozen at 6 ago, loomed over the square like a silent judge, its jammed mechanism a puzzle that defied solution. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag slung over her arm, walked the lanes with Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, her sharp mind weaving through the clues. A locked tower, a body with signs of struggle, a brass cog, a blue thread, a ladder, and a possible string trick to secure the door. The suspect's motives, greed, revenge, desperation, wove a complex tapestry, and Miss Marple, with her St. Mary Mead wisdom, knew the truth lay in the smallest details. "People," she murmured, her needles clicking, "are like stitches. One slip, and the whole pattern unravels." Inspector Craddock, now gaunt from sleepless nights, was drowning in contradictions. The Manor's library, his makeshift headquarters, was cluttered with notes and evidence bags. The locked-room murder of Sir Reginald Harrington, found dead at the base of the tower's stairs, key in his pocket, defied logic. The string trick Miss Marple suggested offered a method, but the who and why remained elusive. Sitting by the drawing-room's fire, Miss Marple listened as Craddock re-interviewed the suspects, her scarf lengthening as she observed. "Patience, Inspector," she said softly. "The truth is there, hiding in plain sight, like a dropped stitch in a shawl." New evidence surfaced, sharpening suspicions. A groundskeeper found a small knife, its blade nicked, hidden in the rose beds near the tower. It wasn't a murder weapon. Sir Reginald died from a fall. But its presence suggested a struggle. The handle bore traces of garden soil pointing to Elias Thorne, whose cottage was nearby. Thorne, questioned again, was defiant. "I prune roses, not people," he growled, his limp heavy as he stood before Craddock. "That knife's been in my shed for years. Someone took it." Miss Marple noted his calloused hands, strong despite his age, and recalled his Boer War agility. Could he have climbed the tower's ivy or used the ladder to reach the vent? His grudge, Sir Reginald's betrayal of his wife, burned fiercely, but the knife felt too obvious, another potential red herring. Lady Victoria Harrington's story grew shakier. A villager, Mr. Tuttle, claimed to have seen her slip into the manor's cellar at 3 a.m. the night of the murder, carrying a small bundle. Confronted, Victoria's composure cracked. "I was fetching a bottle of wine, insomnia, you know," she said, her voice brittle. But the cellar held no wine, only the laudanum bottle from earlier, now confirmed as hers for headaches. No poison was in Sir Reginald's system, but the bundle intrigued Miss Marple. Was it the mysterious parcel Jenny saw, perhaps containing a tool for the tower? Victoria's motive, freedom from a controlling husband and a vast inheritance, loomed large, and her affair with Julian Crane was now an open secret in the village. Her grass-stained shawl, found in the laundry, suggested she'd been outside near the tower. Arthur Harrington's staged attack raised more questions. The torn cloth from the rose beds, dark and fine, matched a cloak in his wardrobe, but he swore it was stolen. "Someone's framing me," he protested, his face flushed. His debts now confirmed at $12,500, and Sir Reginald's threat to disinherit him made him a prime suspect. A new clue emerged, a betting slip dated the day before the murder found in his room, promising a $2,000 payout if a horse won. A desperate bid to clear his debts. Had he confronted his father in the tower, leading to a fatal push? Miss Marple noted his nervous glances, wondering if fear, not guilt, drove him. Mr. Desmond Blackwell's financial secrets deepened. A second ledger, hidden in a locked drawer, showed Sir Reginald's fraud extended to $10,000, with Blackwell's initials forged on several transfers. "He was setting me up," Blackwell admitted, his glasses fogging. "I burned a page to protect myself, not to hide murder." His alibi, working late, was unshaken, but a witness saw him near the manor's gate at 2:30 a.m., pacing. Was he planning to confront Sir Reginald or covering his tracks? Miss Marple's eyes lingered on his trembling hands, sensing a man teetering on the edge of confession or collapse. Miss Clara Voss, the maid, remained a quiet storm. A kitchen boy revealed she'd been seen polishing the clock tower's spare key the day before the murder, not at 2 a.m. as she claimed. "I misremembered," Clara said, her voice steady but her eyes sharp. The locket's note, "He must pay," tied to Sir Reginald's secret child, hinted at a deeper motive. Village gossip suggested Clara had raised the boy as her own before he was sent away, fueling her hatred. Her access to the tower key and knowledge of the manor made her a candidate for the string trick. But her calm was unnerving. Miss Marple recalled a St. Mary Mead case, a quiet woman with a hidden fire, and wondered what Clara concealed. A fresh clue emerged. The bell rope in the tower, frayed as if grabbed during a fall, had a faint smear of blood, not Sir Reginald's. The doctor confirmed it was fresh, likely from the killer's hand, cut during a struggle. Whose? Thorne's knife suggested him, but Clara's kitchen duties involved sharp tools, and Arthur's scratches from his attack were suspect. Miss Marple returned to the tower, climbing to the bell chamber. The blue thread caught on a gear matched nothing in the manor, suggesting an outsider or a clever plant. The vent, high and narrow, remained a puzzle. A rope could have been used, but the scratch nearby hinted at a tool, perhaps a hook to jam the clock or manipulate the lock. Another red herring surfaced. A villager found a vial of sleeping draught in the manor's stables, labeled with Blackwell's name. Like the laudanum, it was irrelevant. Sir Reginald wasn't drugged, but it pointed fingers, perhaps to deflect from the real killer. Miss Marple dismissed it, focusing on the blood on the rope. "A struggle," she murmured to Craddock, "and a mistake. The killer didn't expect to leave a mark." Village rumors added confusion. A barmaid swore Blackwell and Victoria were plotting in the garden, but her story shifted when pressed. Another claimed Arthur had bribed Clara for the tower key, but no proof emerged. Miss Marple sifted through the noise, her mind on the string trick. It required access, timing, and nerve. Clara's keys, Thorne's agility, or Blackwell's precision could fit. Victoria's nocturnal wanderings and Arthur's desperation couldn't be ignored either. As night fell, Miss Marple sat with Mrs. Bantry in the cottage, her needles clicking steadily. "The killer is clever, Eleanor," she said, "but human. The blood, the thread, the ladder, they're threads in a pattern, but some are false. The tower's lock was tricked, the clock jammed for a reason. We're close, but the truth is slippery." Her eyes drifted to the clock tower, its silhouette stark against the starry sky. The manor's lights burned late, each suspect wrestling with their secrets, Victoria pacing, Arthur drinking, Blackwell writing, Clara polishing, Thorne sharpening his shears. Chapter 8. The revelation builds. By October 21, 1925, Marigold Lane was a village on the brink, its cobblestone paths alive with whispers of fear and intrigue. The clock tower, its face still frozen at 6 a.m., stood as a silent witness to Sir Reginald Harrington's murder, its locked door and jammed gears a puzzle that confounded all but one. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag ever at her side, walked the lanes with Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, her sharp mind weaving through the clues. A string trick to lock the tower, a blood-smeared bell rope, a blue thread, a misplaced ladder, and motives tangled in greed, revenge, and betrayal. "In St. Mary Mead," she murmured, her needles clicking softly, "I've learned that the truth hides in the smallest details, like a flaw in a lace pattern." Inspector Craddock, now pale and weary, was buried in evidence in Marigold Manor's library, his notes a chaotic map of the impossible crime. The locked room murder, Sir Reginald found dead at the base of the tower's stairs, key in his pocket, bruises hinting at a struggle, defied simple answers. The string trick Miss Marple proposed explained the lock, but the killer's identity remained elusive. Sitting by the drawing room's fire, Miss Marple listened as Craddock pressed the suspects, her scarf lengthening as she observed. "The pattern is forming, Inspector," she said quietly. "We're close. Closer than they know." A breakthrough clue emerged, sharpening the focus. A blacksmith's apprentice tidying his shop near the square found a small iron hook, its tip bent, hidden in a pile of scrap near the clock tower. It matched the scratch in the bell chamber's vent, suggesting a tool used to manipulate the lock or jam the clock. The hook bore traces of oil, linking it to the drop on the tower stairs. Miss Marple examined it, her eyes gleaming. "A clever device," she said to Craddock. "Someone used this to pull the string or tamper with the gears. Someone with access and skill." The hook pointed to Elias Thorne, whose shed held similar tools, but Clara Voss's kitchen duties and Desmond Blackwell's precision couldn't be ruled out. The blue thread, still unmatched, suggested an outsider or a deliberate plant. Lady Victoria Harrington's story unraveled further. A postman revealed she'd sent no letter to London, contradicting her claim about the parcel seen at 4 a.m. Confronted, Victoria's composure shattered. "It was a gift for Julian," she stammered, her diamonds glinting nervously. "I dropped it in the garden." But the grass-stained shawl and her midnight argument with Sir Reginald, witnessed by Mrs. Phipps, painted a darker picture. Miss Marple wondered about the parcel. Could it have held the hook or a duplicate key? Victoria's motive, an inheritance and freedom to join her lover Julian Crane, was compelling, but her theatrics suggested fear more than guilt. Had she been in the tower, or merely nearby? Arthur Harrington's desperation grew palpable. A new find, a crumpled note in his waistbin, read, "Meet me at the tower, 3 a.m. It was unsigned in a scrawled hand unlike his own. "I never went," Arthur insisted, his voice cracking. "Someone's setting me up." His betting slip, promising 2,000, was now void. The horse had lost, deepening his debts. The torn cloak from his attack matched the cloth in the rose beds, but its theft remained unproven. Miss Marple noted his trembling hands, recalling his whispered meeting with Clara Voss at the pub. An alliance, or another red herring? His motive, $12,500 in debts and a lost inheritance, was strong, but his fear seemed genuine. Desmond Blackwell's secret spilled open. A maid found a hidden compartment in his desk containing a letter from Sir Reginald accusing him of embezzlement. "You'll be ruined," it read, dated the day before the murder. Blackwell, cornered, admitted burning the ledger page to hide his own $500 theft, but swore he hadn't killed. "I needed him alive to expose his fraud," he said, his glasses fogging. Yet his pacing near the manor gate at 2:30 a.m., seen by a villager, suggested more. Miss Marple's eyes lingered on his precise handwriting. Could it mimic the forged initials in the ledger? His motive, avoiding ruin, was clear, but the hook required physical daring he seemed to lack. Clara Voss's calm began to crack. A new witness, the manor's cook, saw her near the tower at 4:30 a.m., not 5 as she claimed, carrying a small bag. "I was fetching herbs," Clara said, her voice tight, but the bag was never found. The locket's note, "He must pay." And her story of Sir Reginald's secret child fueled suspicion. The child, now a grown man abroad, was a dead end, but Clara's rage at Sir Reginald's past was not. Her access to the tower key and a locksmith's receipt found in her room for a special order hinted at a duplicate. Miss Marple recalled her polishing the keys. Had she made a copy to stage the locked room trick? Clara's motive, revenge for her sister and the child, was potent, but her composure suggested control. Elias Thorne's story wavered under scrutiny. A villager confirmed his war training included climbing, and his limp, less pronounced at times, suggested he could scale the tower's ivy or use the ladder. The knife in the rose beds with its nicked blade matched a set in his shed, and the hook's oil traced to his tools. "I didn't touch the tower," Thorne growled, but his eyes darted to the manor. His grudge, Sir Reginald's betrayal of his wife and wartime comrades, was a burning motive, and his knowledge of the tower's structure made him dangerous. Miss Marple wondered if the hook was his, used to jam the clock or pull the string. A critical deduction emerged. The blood on the bell rope, not Sir Reginald's, suggested the killer cut their hand during the struggle. Miss Marple, revisiting the tower, noticed a faint blood smear on the vent's edge, matching the ropes. "The killer reached through," she told Craddock, "perhaps to retrieve the string or place the hook." The vent, narrow but accessible with a ladder, pointed to Thorne's agility or Clara's precision. The blue thread, still a mystery, might belong to a glove or scarf used to avoid prints. A clever touch. Village gossip added noise. A rumor of Arthur and Clara's alliance persisted, but the barmaid's story collapsed. She'd been paid to lie. Another claimed Blackwell and Victoria were lovers, but their tense exchanges suggested otherwise. A boy swore he heard the tower door creak at 3:45 a.m., but fog blurred his view. Miss Marple dismissed these, focusing on the hook and blood. "The killer planned carefully," she said, "but blood doesn't lie." As dusk fell, Miss Marple sat with Mrs. Bantry in the cottage, her needles clicking. "The pattern is clear, Eleanor," she said. "The hook, the blood, the key. They point to one hand, but the motive is still hidden. The tower was a stage, the lock a trick, the clock a lie." Her eyes drifted to the clock tower, its silhouette stark against the twilight. The manor's lights flickered, each suspect. Victoria pacing, Arthur drinking, Blackwell writing, Clara polishing, Thorne pruning, bracing for the truth to break. Chapter 9. Confrontation. By October 22, 1925, Marigold Lane was a village holding its breath, its cobblestone paths hushed under a heavy fog. The clock tower, its gilded face still stuck at 6:00, loomed over the square like a judge awaiting a verdict. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag slung over her arm, stood in the manor's drawing room, her sharp eyes scanning the assembled suspects. The air was thick with tension, the fire's crackle the only sound as Inspector Craddock prepared to confront the household. Miss Marple's mind wove through the clues. A string trick to lock the tower, a blood-smeared bell rope, a blue thread, an iron hook, and motive steeped in greed, revenge, and betrayal. "In St. Mary Mead," she said softly to Mrs. Eleanor Bantry, who sat wide-eyed beside her, "I've seen how truth hides in plain sight like a dropped stitch in a shawl." Craddock, his face etched with exhaustion, stood before the suspects. Lady Victoria Harrington, Arthur Harrington, Desmond Blackwell, Clara Voss, and Elias Thorne. The locked room murder of Sir Reginald Harrington, found dead at the tower's base, key in his pocket, bruises hinting at a struggle, had baffled him for days. Miss Marple's deductions from the string trick to the tampered clock had given him a path, but the killer's identity remained just out of reach. Someone in this room knows the truth, Craddock said, his voice firm, and with Miss Marple's help we'll have it now. Miss Marple, her needles clicking gently, began. You see, it's like in my village. People overlook the obvious. Sir Reginald was pushed down the tower stairs, the door locked to make it seem impossible. But a string through the keyhole pulled from outside secured the lock. The clock was jammed at 6 to mislead us, but the killer left traces, a hook, a thread, blood. Her eyes swept the room, noting each suspect's reaction. Lady Victoria, pale beneath her rouge, clutched her hands. The grass-stained shawl, her 4 a.m. wanderings, and the missing parcel pointed to her, but Miss Marple sensed fear, not guilt. Lady Victoria, she said, your argument with Sir Reginald at midnight was about your lover, Julian Crane, wasn't it? You wanted freedom, but the parcel you carried, what was it? Victoria's voice trembled. A scarf for Julian, nothing more. But her eyes darted to Arthur, hinting at a shared secret. Miss Marple filed it away. Victoria was involved, but not the killer. Arthur Harrington, his face flushed, shifted uneasily. The monogrammed handkerchief, the betting slip, and his staged attack screamed guilt, yet his fear seemed genuine. Mr. Arthur, Miss Marple said, your debts drove you to desperation, but the note, meet me at the tower, 3 a.m., wasn't yours, was it? Arthur shook his head. Someone lured me, but I stayed in my room. The torn cloak matched his, but Miss Marple suspected a frame. His alliance with Clara, rumored in the village, suggested a plot, but his trembling hands spoke of panic, not murder. Desmond Blackwell, his glasses fogged, gripped his ledger. The hidden letter accusing him of embezzlement and the burned page pointed to motive, but his alibi, working late, was solid. Mr. Blackwell, Miss Marple said, you feared Sir Reginald's frame-up, but your pacing at 2:30 a.m. wasn't about murder, was it? You were planning to flee. Blackwell nodded, his voice hoarse. I couldn't face ruin. His precision could have crafted the hook, but his physical timidity made climbing unlikely. Miss Marple's eyes lingered, guilty of theft, but not murder. Clara Voss stood rigid, her locket gleaming. The duplicate key, her 4:30 a.m. sighting near the tower, and the note, he must pay, made her a suspect. Miss Voss, Miss Marple said, your sister's pain and the secret child fueled your rage. You had the keys, the skill to copy one. Did you use it? Clara's eyes flashed. I hated him, but I didn't kill. Her calm was cracking, but Miss Marple sensed truth in her denial. The locksmith's receipt was damning, yet her role felt incomplete. Elias Thorne, his weathered face hard, met Miss Marple's gaze. The knife, the hook, the muddy ladder, and his war-trained agility pointed to him. Mr. Thorne, she said, you knew the tower's secrets, every stone, every vent. Your grudge was deep, your wife's death a wound unhealed. The hook was yours, wasn't it? Thorne's jaw tightened. I fix things, not break them, he growled, but his limp faltered as he shifted. Miss Marple's needles paused. The blood on the rope, the oil on the hook, Thorne was close to the truth. The revelation crystallized. The killer, Miss Marple said, her voice clear, used the vent, not the door. A hook through that narrow gap, pulling a string to lock the door after pushing Sir Reginald. The blood on the rope and vent, a cut hand, from the struggle or the hook. The clock jammed to confuse the time of death. She turned to Thorne. You climbed the ivy, didn't you? War training, a ladder for support, a hook to tamper and lock. Your wife's betrayal by Sir Reginald wasn't just personal. He profited from your unit's deaths in the war, didn't he? Thorne's eyes blazed, but he said nothing. Craddock, stunned, produced a final clue. A glove, found in Thorne's shed, stained with blood matching the ropes. The blue thread matched its lining. You pushed him, Miss Marple said, after luring him with a note, perhaps through Arthur's name. You climbed, entered via the vent, fought, and locked the door with your hook. The room froze. Victoria gasped. Arthur paled. Blackwell slumped. Clara stared. Thorne's silence broke. He deserved it, he spat. Betrayed my mates, ruined my wife, took everything. I climbed, I pushed, I locked it tight. The impossible crime was solved. Thorne's agility, the vent's access, the hook's precision. The blood was his, cut on the vent's edge. The clock's jam was a distraction set to mislead. Craddock stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Elias Thorne, you're under arrest. The room exhaled, the tension breaking like a snapped thread. Miss Marple's needles resumed, her voice soft. Human nature. Inspector, it's always the key. As Thorne was led away, the manor stirred. Victoria weeping, Arthur stunned, Blackwell silent, Clara expressionless. The clock tower's shadow lingered, its secrets finally spoken. Chapter 10. Justice Served. By October 23, 1925, Marigold Lane was a village exhaling, its cobblestone paths softened by a gentle autumn sun. The clock tower, its gilded face still stuck at 6, stood quieter now, its secret spilled in the manor's drawing room the day before. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag slung over her arm, sat in Mrs. Eleanor Bantry's cottage, her scarf nearly complete as she reflected on the case. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrington, found dead at the base of the locked tower, key in his pocket, bruises hinting at a struggle, had gripped the village for days. Miss Marple's deductions from the string trick to the blood-smeared rope had unmasked Elias Thorne as the killer. Human nature, she murmured, her needles clicking, is like a village garden. Beneath the roses, there's always a root of truth. The morning was calm, but the manor buzzed with aftermath. Inspector Craddock, his face less haggard now, had taken Thorne into custody. The gardener's confession echoing through the village. He deserved it. Betrayed my mates, ruined my wife. The locked room mystery was solved, but Miss Marple, sipping tea with Mrs. Bantry, knew the story needed its final stitches. Eleanor, she said, her eyes twinkling, a case like this isn't just about the crime. It's about the why, the how, and the healing that follows. In the manor's library, Craddock gathered the household one last time, Miss Marple at his side. The suspects, Lady Victoria Harrington, Arthur Harrington, Desmond Blackwell, and Clara Voss, sat in tense silence, their faces a mix of relief and unease. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the oak-paneled walls as Craddock recounted the case. Thanks to Miss Marple, he said, we've unraveled an impossible crime. Let's lay it out for clarity. Miss Marple, her voice soft but clear, began. Sir Reginald's death was no accident. He was pushed down the clock tower stairs, his neck broken between 3 and 5 a.m. The door was locked from inside, the key in his pocket, suggesting an impossible crime, but it wasn't. A string through the keyhole pulled from outside locked the door after the deed. The clock jammed at 6 con was a distraction set to confuse the timeline. She paused, her needle steady. Elias Thorne, driven by a decades-old grudge, was the killer. She turned to the evidence. The blood on the bell rope, not Sir Reginald's, came from Thorne's hand, cut on the vent's edge as he reached through. The blue thread from his glove caught on a gear. The iron hook, found in the blacksmith's scrap, was his, used to pull the string and jam the clock. Thorne's war training let him climb the tower's ivy using a ladder. For support, entering via the narrow vent. He lured Sir Reginald with a note, forged in Arthur's name, to the tower at 3 a.m. Craddock nodded, holding up the glove, its bloodstains stark. Thorne confessed, he said. Sir Reginald betrayed his unit in the Boer War, selling secrets for profit while Thorne's mates died. Years later, he dismissed Thorne's wife, accusing her of theft to cover his own indiscretions. She died in poverty, and Thorne nursed his revenge. The room was silent, the weight of Thorne's pain settling over them. Lady Victoria, her diamonds dimmed by grief, spoke softly. "I hated Reginald's control, but I didn't kill him." Miss Marple nodded. "Your wanderings at 4 a.m., the grass-stained shawl, were about your lover, Julian Crane. The parcel was a scarf, as you said, but fear made you lie." Victoria's eyes welled, relief mixing with shame. Her motive, freedom and inheritance, was real, but her role was peripheral. Arthur Harrington, his face pale, admitted his desperation. "I thought of confronting father, but I was too scared." The monogrammed handkerchief and staged attack were red herrings, likely planted by Thorne to shift blame. "You were a pawn, Mr. Arthur," Miss Marple said gently. "Your debts drove you to folly, but not murder." Arthur's shoulders slumped, his future uncertain but free of handcuffs. Desmond Blackwell, clutching his ledger, confessed his theft. "I took $500, but Sir Reginald's fraud was bigger, 10,000 hidden. I burned evidence to save myself." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "Your fear of ruin blinded you, but you didn't climb that tower." Blackwell's pacing at 2:30 a.m. was about escape, not murder, his precision unfit for the hook's daring use. Clara Voss, her locket still at her throat, met Miss Marple's gaze. "I wanted him to pay," she said, her voice steady. "For my sister, for the boy he abandoned." The duplicate key, the locksmith's receipt, pointed to her, but Miss Marple shook her head. "You planned, Miss Voss, but you didn't act. Your key was a temptation, not a tool." Clara's calm held a flicker of relief. She'd harbored hate, but stopped short of blood. Miss Marple turned to the room. Thorne's motive was personal, his method meticulous. He climbed, fought, pushed, and locked the door, leaving blood and thread as his mistakes. The clock's jam was his final flourish, but it betrayed him. She recalled a St. Mary Mead case, a gardener with a grudge, a hidden trap, and smiled faintly. "Human nature, you see, is much the same everywhere." Craddock closed his notebook. "Thorne's in custody, facing trial. The village can rest." He looked at Miss Marple, gratitude in his eyes. "We'd have called it an accident without you." The suspects dispersed, Victoria to her boudoir, Arthur to his debts, Blackwell to his ledgers, Clara to her duties. The manor felt lighter, its secrets aired. Miss Marple walked the village square with Mrs. Bantry, the clock tower now being repaired by a mechanic. The gears would turn again, the chime restored. "Justice is a curious thing, Eleanor," she said, her needles clicking. "It doesn't erase pain, but it balances the scales." She paused, gazing at the tower. Thorne's anger was deep, but so was his loss. We judge the crime, not the man. Mrs. Bantry sighed. "Will Marigold Lane ever be the same?" Miss Marple smiled. "Villages are resilient like people. They heal, but they remember." She tucked her knitting away, her scarf complete. A delicate lace pattern, each stitch a clue resolved. The next day, Miss Marple boarded the train back to St. Mary Mead, her visit brief but unforgettable. The village waved her off, the clock tower chiming anew, its face ticking past 600. Marigold Lane settled into quiet, its secrets buried, its peace restored. "Until the next mystery," Miss Marple murmured, her eyes twinkling as the train pulled away.